Leadoff man.
24/7. Ryan, who are some guys that are playing a lot more than maybe you thought they would even entering the season?
Well, I mean, certainly some of the freshmen and the younger guys, I would say, would probably be top of the list. Yeah, I'd probably say most of the freshmen, you just don't know when they come in. For older guys, I mean, it's good to see Mitch Rossi, doing what he's doing. Trying to think on defense if there's anybody else.
Steel Chambers.
Yeah, I guess that's a great one. Yeah, Steele, made the transition over from running back, and so to say last spring we would expect him to be playing linebacker as much as he has, yeah, I would say he's a pleasant surprise.
And just a quick follow-up on Steele. Do you expect his role to continue to increase as the season progresses?
Yes. Yep.
Second row, right, Joey Kaufman, Columbus Dispatch.
Ryan, last year after the Indiana game, you kind of talked about the pressure they put on Justin, and they were blitzing like almost every snap. What was the challenge of that, and do you think they could try to replicate something similar this week?
Yeah, I think it was a high risk, high reward. We had a bunch of big plays early on, and then towards the end of the game we were kind of just hanging on, and so we got to continue to be aggressive. And some of the decision making in that game wasn't very good, but they're a good defense. They have good scheme and good players, so we're going to have to be on our game in terms of execution.
Did they do anything differently with the new defensive coordinator this year, or just the fact that Tom Allen has defensive background?
Yeah, it's very similar. Coach Allen has kind of run that defense for years. He's had some guys that bring in their own flavor to it, but the crux of the defense has stayed the same.
Third row left, Dan Hope, 11 Warriors.
Hey Ryan, the last time we had talked to you about Quinn Ewers, you said he wasn't ready to play in a game yet. I'm just curious, kind of what have you seen in his development to this point, and would he be ready now if you guys needed him?
No, he's not quite ready yet. It's going to be a little while. He's really doing a good job of starting to learn how to be a college football player, and there's a lot that comes with that. I think he's starting to get more accustomed to the day-to-day grind and what it's like, and starting to get some buddies and that type of thing. But we'll continue to work with them and see. You never know, but I think it's something that's probably going to happen more towards we get into bowl practice in the winter and then into spring practice next year.
Quarterback room in general, like this bye week, this past week, what are kind of things that you maybe emphasize with those guys, try to work on as they continue to develop?
Well, just taking meetings to the field and understanding the game plan on a week-to-week basis, and getting as many mental reps as they possibly can, because you have guys who aren't getting all the reps, and they have to make sure that they get the mental reps as well, standing in the back, actually body repping it, so that and even for CJ, when Kyle and Jack are getting reps, he can go through and say, okay, we ran this play against this coverage, we run this play against that coverage, and you're not always going to be able to body rep every play in a game, so against every look, and so that's a big part of it.
Going to go far right, Tony Gergman, Buckeyes.
Ryan, regarding your offensive line, how much did last year play into where you had a different offensive line sometimes every day in practice to allow them to kind of do that this year seamlessly?
I hadn't really thought of that, but I guess you're right. There was just so much moving around last year that it wasn't a big deal this year. But at the end of the day, the idea is that if guys are playing at starter level, that we play them, and that's at every position. And this year we found some guys, like Matt has jumped in there, and so we've played some depth.
Second row, middle, Bill Rabinowitz, Columbus Dispatch.
Ryan, did you get done, or what did you get done last week? Do you be comfortable with what you did get accomplished?
Yeah, I think so. The first thing, obviously, on a bye week is to evaluate where you're at, certainly personnel-wise and schematically, and how you're coaching things, and find tendencies and different things like that. But then you also have the rest part of it, midway point of the season, make sure that the guys are rested up. But then we also want to work on fundamentals and get some guys some work and do some teaching. We did that Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. And so we'll see. We got a really big practice today. We got back at it yesterday, but today's a typical Tuesday practice, and looking forward to a lot of energy and spirit today.
The second half of the season is going to be a gauntlet, obviously. How prepared do you think you guys are for that right now?
We'll see. I mean, I think we're in a lot better place than we were at the beginning of the season, and we got some rest. So now it's going to be a big run, like you said. But all we can do is, I've heard the cliche a million times, take it one game at a time, one day at a time, and that's what we're going to do. And we got to go on the road, and it's a night game there, and they'll have a good atmosphere, kind of like the last times we played on the road and in a conference game. And we're going to get their best shot, and they have some good players and good schemes. So that's all we can do, and just take it 1 week at a time and keep building, which is what we've done to this point.
Second row right, Austin Ward, Letterman Ross.
Ryan, you've talked a lot in the past about the expectations for your starting quarterback with first-round pick, Heisman, and all that you make that clear when that guy has that job, that's the pressure that comes. When something like maybe the Heisman starts to become more of a potential reality for CJ, do the conversations then have to change about handling that, or because you've made it clear from the start, does that alleviate that?
Well, I think it goes back to the conversation that, when someone gives criticism or praise, you have to treat it the same way. And that you have to stay focused, you have to stay poised, and I use the term all the time, you can't ride that roller coaster. And, just like early on, there was plenty of criticism to go around, and now there's praise coming, and it's the same thing in my mind, and that's what we talk about. And so, staying focused and being disciplined enough to just, it's 1 week at a time. And if you don't believe that, go out and lose a game, and then all of a sudden, you're right back to where you started. So that's the challenge that not just CJ, a bunch of our guys, our whole team has had to embrace here, and it's something that's being relayed to them.
It seemed like it took maybe 4 or 5 weeks for Dwayne to find his voice a couple of years ago, and for Justin to become that leader. Where do you think CJ is in that part of being that go-to guy on the offense?
Yeah, I think he's done certain things well. I think he communicates well with those guys, and I think his relationships, with the players on offense is strong. I think he's done a good job of that. And the better he plays, the more energy he has. And he's still a young player, so he still has a ways to go. But I'm encouraged with what I see in terms of leadership.
Third row middle, Bill Landis, The Athletic.
Ryan, I know some of the publicly available grades and the numbers don't necessarily reflect what you guys have internally, but Matt Jones, with those numbers, looks like he's playing not only as one of your best linemen, but one of the best linemen in the country. I know you did a lot of shuffling before the season to get your best five. If the best five starts to change at all throughout the course of the season, do you consider shuffling then too? And is Matt giving you guys anything to think about?
I think he's played well when he's been in there for sure. I think a lot of the guys have played well. But that's part of, the bye week is to go through and look at the personnel and figure out who gives us the best chance to win. And we'll always try to put the best players out there, yeah.
And along the lines of the pressure that Indiana showed you guys last year, just how do you think CJ's been in identifying that stuff, setting the front the right way, calling the right protections?
I think he's been solid. I think this will be a bigger challenge this week. They like to bring a lot of pressure, and so we got to do a great job of identifying that and have a great plan. But I think he has done a good job of that. But again, the challenge is going to start increasing week in and week out, and so that's on his plate this week, and certainly with the offensive line as well.
Third row middle, Nathan Baird, Cleveland.com.
I think it's kind of along those same lines. What does a quarterback have to have in order to kind of make those adjustments to those things he hasn't seen yet? And especially for him, Justin was in his third year. He's doing this, for the sixth time.
Right.
So what is it about a quarterback that what do you guys have to do to prepare him for that?
Yeah, I think it's always on an individual basis. What kind of foundation did they have coming here? How much did they play in high school? What kind of system did they play in? And then the second part of it is the mental part. Is can they visualize things? Can they project what they may see? Can they watch film and then take the meeting to the field? All those things come into play, and every guy's unique in that way. And so you try to do the best you can to explain to them what's coming, how they need to prepare, give them a clean plan to allow them to see things the right way, and then let them go play. Because at the end of the day, they have to go compete. Things are going to come up in a game that you can't prepare for, and so you want them to have a clear mind when they go on the field.
Switching gears a little bit, I know you were, I think, one of several coaches who came through Indianapolis when they were recruiting DeJuan Jones, and it seemed like part of that, from talking to people, was sort of an analysis of how much does he like football, how committed is he to this, how much was that part of what you guys were assessing then, and then what convinced you that he was serious about football and could do this?
Well, he told me, and I believed him. He loves basketball, And sometimes I say he's a skill player in a big man's body. That's kind of what we see with DeJuan. He went to one of my son's AAU basketball games, and he wasn't in the gym for more than 2 minutes before he was yelling at the refs and yelling at my son and the team and why they're not doing this and that. He loves to play. He really does. The thing that's been the challenge for DeJuan is the daily grind of football. You know, when you play basketball, you go out there and you shoot layups and you run up and down, and you're always playing. In football, especially when you're playing the offensive line, there's no ball. There's not a lot of games. And so that adjustment has been something that he's worked through, but he's come out the back end of it. And if he continues to embrace that grind, his ceiling's really, really high.
Second row left, Stephen Haynes, Cleveland.com.
Just a little bit more, CJ. When, in your experience with first-year quarterbacks, when do you kind of see it? At what point in the season do you see it click in terms of, I mean, you're a play caller,
Yeah.
and him knowing, okay, we're calling this, but why we're actually calling this play?
Yeah, I think that grows every game. You know, you start to understand exactly what you're saying. You know, is, hey, when we call this play, here's what we're thinking. This is what we're looking for. You know, we're looking to take a shot. We're looking to, you know, get a completion. We're looking for this type of blitz here. You know, those type of stuff, or that type of stuff. And so that's all part of it. But the biggest thing is, as we head into these games, is it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for everybody. And he's got to continue to be tough, physically tough, mentally tough, and emotionally tough. And that's where, if he keeps growing in that area, then we got a chance.
Is that timeline similar with every young quarterback, or does it kind of vary from person?
I think it varies. Yeah, I think it's unique to each guy. But yeah, there's certainly a time where, you know, you look at certain guys, and sometimes it's in practice, sometimes it's in games, sometimes, you know, you never know when it is. You just see traits in somebody where you start to believe them, you know, and it's not just one thing. It's over time. There's a body of work where you build trust with the coaches, and that's really what everybody's trying to do, not just the quarterbacks. Is every time you come in the building, every time you go to practice, every time you play in a game, you're trying to build trust. Same thing with the coaches. You're trying to build trust with the players, and that's by what you do and how you do it. And if you bring it every day and you build that trust between the player and the coach, that's when, you know, a lot of success happens.
Over here to the right, Bob Berry, WBNS TV.
Coach, football is a game of repetitiveness. You get on a roll over and over. You take a break. Is there any concern getting back on a roll with a young team? And what can you do as a coach to get them, you know, because they were rolling?
I thought our prep the last 2 weeks leading into the bye week was excellent. And then because of that, what you're saying, what we did last week is we kept a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday practice the same way that we had going into the last 2 weeks. And then we came right back. Usually what we would have done is maybe have it a little bit different this week, but we didn't. We went out in helmets yesterday, and then today will be a typical Tuesday so that we can keep that same work week going, because I thought that was one of the biggest things we finally got into, kind of like into week 3, week 4, was our routine, a routine that our players didn't know and our coaches probably forgot about because of everything that happened last year. So that's something that we've been focusing on.
Indiana always seems to play you guys tough. Just what do you expect Saturday night over there?
Always play us tough. Always have really good scheme and play us hard. You know, and it comes different ways. You know, you think about the game a few years ago. It was really close early on, and we were able to pull away. Last year, we were up early, and they came back. You got to play 4 quarters against Indiana, and so we're gonna have to plan on doing that.
Right behind him, Clay Hall, WSYX.
Ryan, how much time are you spending with the defense now? Are they on their own? Do you monitor what they're up to, obviously?
Yeah, I check in periodically, I mean, certainly after the games and at certain times during the week to find out where we're at and conversations about the game plan going in and things that I see. But the last week or so, I've kind of stepped away a little bit and allowed them to operate.
And right behind Clay, Adam King, WBNS.
You've kind of talked about the confidence of this team growing since the Oregon game. Coming off the bye week with such a stretch ahead of you guys, where is the confidence and mentality of this team?
Well, I think that they start to see themselves playing better. They're starting to believe in the guy next to them. They're starting to believe in themselves. And anytime you can do that, you know, that's exciting and it brings energy. So we got to pick up from where we left off a couple weeks ago, and it starts with a great week of practice. You know, I can tell you probably midway through the week how it's going to go based on how we practice. And the good news is our guys believe right now. You know, I think they're excited about what these next 6 weeks can bring, and certainly what this week is going to bring.
Fourth row middle, Rob All, Columbus Dispatch.
Ryan, you saw what happened with Iowa. So far, so good for you. You've avoided the big upset. What's the psychology of getting guys, players, to believe that they can do it, and also believing that it can happen to them, how to avoid that? I know it's preparation, but what about psychology?
Well, I think I've been saying it a lot, and I think it's just what we've really focused on, for the last 4 or 5 weeks, is that if you do it in practice, if you do it on a Tuesday and a Wednesday really well, then you can have great confidence going into the week because you've already done it. It's like going into a test and having the answers to the test. If you're unprepared for a test, boy, that's a bad feeling. But and that's the one way for us that we build confidence in the psychology of it all. In terms of week in and week out, we know here we're going to get everybody's best shot, and we have to bring it. And the first thing we have to do is go back to fundamentals, which is taking care of the football and tackling and using our hands inside when we're blocking and being smart and disciplined, understanding, especially early in the game, field position football, playing well in the red zone. All those type of things are critically important because the only times we get ourselves out of whack is when those things don't go well. And if we continue to work on playing really hard, playing really tough, but those things right there in the fundamentals of the game, then we feel like we got a chance.
You've been on both sides, not here, but I'm sure you've seen both sides of it when you've upset teams and now. What happens in game when things start to go sideways? What's the challenge? How do you get it back together? Because I'm sure it feels like a snowball rolling down.
Yeah, well, I think you have to have a plan before, and it's something that we talk about a lot too. Is it's usually going to go one of 3 ways. We're either going to go up early in the game, in which case we got to keep bringing it. You can't let them back in. It's going to be back and forth, and when that's the case, you just keep swinging, or we go down, like we've been, at certain times this year at halftime. And when that happens, we got to stay together. We can't splinter. We can't start to try to make plays. We just have to go back to playing one play at a time in a team fashion, and then you can get yourself back into a game. You can't get it all in one play. And I think sometimes what happens is, somebody starts to press to make a play, and then we get out of whack. So those are the 3 things we talk about, and having that plan. So we've talked about it before we actually get into that situation.
Right next to Rob, Pat Murphy, 24/7.
Ryan, you've talked about what makes Indiana a challenge, but obviously they're not having the season they expected. When you've watched the film, do you see things that have led to, obviously injuries, but things that have led to sort of a disappointing year, or maybe things that you guys need to be aware of because they haven't done those well that, are factors in this game?
Well, I think they've had some injuries, and they're trying to fill those gaps a little bit. And I'm sure they'll be getting some guys back here healthy. They've played some good teams. They've played some really good defenses, and so when you combine all those things, and you're off by a little bit here or there, a team that maybe doesn't have a great record is a lot better than you think. And I think this team is much better than their record indicates.
Sort of similar to Rob's question about the mentality of things. When you have a game like this, night game, but then you have a game next week where everyone's kind of been talking about, you even mentioned the challenge is coming. How do you keep the team focused to have those days in practice that you need to then go into that game, get the job done here so that now you can look forward to next week?
Yeah, I would say that this team should never, be looking at anything other than the game ahead of them. And we've learned that lesson. We understand exactly what's going on. So we're still a work in progress, and we got to bring it every week, and we know that. And I think, that's not something that, we're not going into this game undefeated. It's not like that. We got a lot of respect for Indiana, and this is going to be a hard road game. Everybody in the Big Ten is playing well this year, and you got to bring it every week.
Second row right, Tim May, Letterman Row.
When you go against a team like this, Ryan, their defense, et cetera, you talk about pre-snap reads, quarterbacks getting an idea what's going on, making a call, et cetera. But how much is it on the offensive line to have their head on a swivel, et cetera, be alert? How much does it fall on them finally?
It's big, and there's a lot of work that gets put into that, and it's 5 guys working in harmony together, and the communication is critically important. And so, all the calls have to be made, and whether it's a 2-man slide, a 3-man slide, a 4-man slide, a 5-man slide, everyone's got to be working together in the pass game, and then they have to finish their blocks. But then in the run game as well, making sure they understand when they're on their own, when they're working with somebody else. There's a lot to that, and a lot of preparation that goes on in that room.
Yeah, that's kind of a basic, thought too. They got to be on. But does this offensive line, is it showing that maturity?
Well, I think they like football. And so anytime you have a bunch of guys who talk football, who want to get it right, who take very seriously the calls, and they just, when I see them standing in the back, they're talking about the calls. They're talking about what if this happens. That's when you know you got a pretty good unit there. And I'm very encouraged with just across the board, the guys on our whole team, not just the offensive line, who are talking ball. I mean, they like football. You know, it's sometimes you go around teams, they're in the back talking about, you know, the basketball game last night or what's in the video game or whatever. These guys are talking football, and I think that's encouraging.
Quickie, Haskell Garrett, Cam Brown, do you expect them back this week?
I do.
We'll wrap things up. Fourth row middle, Doug Lamarice, Cleveland.com.
Ryan, since Tregon Henderson had his big breakout game, I think he's had 8, and 16 carries the last 3 games. I know he had the one game where he was a little dinged, but have you guys discussed, I'm sure you have, just the plan for a freshman running back who's your number 1 back, who didn't play high school football last year, who you want in prime shape for the end of the year, and how you'll try to manage him the second half of the season?
Yes, yes to all of those. I think part of that is just the way the games have shaken the last couple of weeks. But like you said, it's a long season, and you know we're trying to gradually build. But I think he's in a pretty good place as we head into these last 6 games.
And follow up on DeJuan Jones, with the way you guys are recruiting, you know, you could just take super highly talented, highly rated guys across the board and fill your whole class. A guy like DeJuan, who maybe has traits, maybe a little more raw, not highly rated, whatever, do you seek out those guys? Do you want to roll the dice on a guy or 2 in each class like that? I don't want to say boom or bust, but the idea of like, well, maybe he's less of a sure thing than some other guys, but man, if he hits, holy moly. Do you want them as a plan of recruiting?
Yes, but I think you have to be smart about how many of those guys you take, and I think that's part of the puzzle. And I think, you know, to answer your question about the recruiting, just in general right now, I think you really have to recruit guys that want to be at Ohio State, guys that want to be Buckeyes, that understand what being a Buckeye is. Because the minute, you know, something doesn't go well, you know, they could walk out the door. And so we're really taking that to heart. You know, we're really evaluating all these guys and what we think, and really trying not to look at the stars or look at, you know, who's recruiting them, but what do we think, and what is the right fit for Ohio State. And I think we've done a good job of that, but we have to continue to focus on that as we move forward. But there are certain situations where you see traits, like you said, and can we develop him? You know, if you take too many projections, you could put yourself in a bad spot. But that's an example of, certainly we want to take guys who have tremendous traits that want to be at Ohio State, want to be a Buckeye, and willing to put the work in. And then DeJuan's an example of that.
Great. Coach, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Seeing you again.
All right. Good deal. We're going to open up the floor for Coach Washington, second row right, Austin Ward, Letterman row.
Al, it feels like through training camp and even the first couple of weeks that your unit was looked at as maybe the most questions.
Yeah.
And it's really come a long way, it seems like, from the outside in a month.
Yeah.
What's produced that?
You know what, I think the number one thing that has helped is just time. You know, those guys have gotten better every rep. I think they've gotten their cleats under them a little bit. And just the more you do anything, the better you get. We still got a ways to go to get to our standard, obviously, but very proud of the progress amidst all the challenge. You know what I mean? So I think that will probably be the biggest, reason for the progression, the improvement.
Yeah. I recognize that you don't have a lot of self-doubt about your own ability, but were there times in August where you were looking at that group, you're in the room, like, man, I don't know what's going to happen. How did you look at it and then compare that to now?
Yeah, listen, the early on in the year, right, the unknowns, right, we talked about that's a reality, but I knew who the caliber player and person that each of those guys were, and at the end of the day, that's what's going to hold up. And so, I've always been confident in who we have out there. I love the room. I love the guys that are in there. So at the end of the day, I feel that they can get it done, and I expect them to get it done. And that's just the mentality you got to have, and I think we're starting to see that. We're starting to see that progression.
Third row middle, Nathan Baird, Cleveland.com.
Yeah.
Hey, Nathan.
I want to ask, and I'm not sure if this person is even still in your room technically, but Craig Young, the way he's kind of bounced around, I guess, how do you see him fitting into this defense the second half of the season? Is there a role for him to play? Because Ryan was talking recently about trying to find him some new spot on the field.
Yeah, so his role has been, where you've seen him in that bullet role. And, as far as my room goes, he's in the defensive back room. So, I'm obviously very close with Craig, and I see his role, evolving every week. You saw last time he was out there, he ended the game with a pick six. And he's another guy who doesn't have a bunch of reps under his belt, so he's slowly, gaining that momentum that we all need to gain. So I see his role continue to grow week in and week out.
Where are things right now with Neatote? And
Yeah.
I know he got a little bit slowed down just because of you guys couldn't rep him the way you wanted to, I think, right in the preseason. So how big of a role do you see him being able to take in the second half of the year?
Yeah, he's another guy. So his story is, he came in the middle of the summer and really not knowing what his future would be. And as a result, you can't dedicate as many reps as you'd like to because you may be, those reps may be better served somewhere else. So he's really done a great job of picking everything up from the scheme to the way we handle business. And, he had a hiccup early on in just terms of just getting his body back together. But we expect him to continue to increase his role as the second half goes. So we expect both big things out of both those guys.
Far left, Justin Holbrook, WCMH-TV.
What is it about Ronnie's game that allows him to go back and forth between kind of linebacker, kind of safety, and make plays in both levels, and also still have a nose for the football no matter where he is on the field?
Well, I think number one, he is a defensive back. He's a bullet, but he stays. He meets with the defensive backs. But from my vantage point, Rocket, number one, he's very intelligent. He has a great instinct on the field. So those guys, the further away from the ball you are, I think that plays a major role. What kind of angles you take, what kind of disguise are you showing. He has a knack for all of that, on top of being a really good athlete and leader. I think he's emerged as one of the leaders not only on the defense but the team. So I think that piece of it for Rocket separates him and is helping him right now, produce the way he has. He's been playing lights out.
Feels like Steele's made that transition as well to leader. Did you expect him to take this on as quickly as he had, making that transition over the summer to where he is now?
Yeah, because again, he came, in the summertime when he came, it was kind of one of those experimental, sort of speak. He wasn't like he was completely out of running back. And as the summer went, he kind of gravitated towards it, took to it, and it's really taken off, man. Every rep he's out there, he's getting better, and he is becoming more of a leader. I think he's starting to feel more comfortable, which is very important. And again, he would be the first to tell you there's things that he wants to attack. Like our single focus right now is improving every day and really putting everything else out of our mind. But he's a guy, man. In time, he's going to be a very, very good player, as you all can see.
Third row left, Dan Hope, 11 Warriors.
Yeah, Al, just how challenging was it for your room when you lost both Dallas and Kayvon in 1 week, and kind of how did you kind of keep the room together after that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So first off, that whole situation, both of them, man, I've got nothing but love for those kids. I spent so much time with them, and I support them as they go forth and do what they feel they need to do. It may have been, the perception may have been one thing. The reality is, I think when, understanding the foundation of the room, so to speak, understanding the reality of everything, we held it together by just staying focused on what was the objective, and we all support, we were all supportive. So it wasn't, it is what it is, so to speak, and you have to be supportive, and we got to keep moving forward. So that was our mentality, and that's kind of been what has kept us moving forward.
Obviously, those guys, they had some frustrations about their playing time. They had waited their turn for 3 years. They didn't get to play. How hard was that to navigate when you have guys that, maybe they've waited their turn, maybe they felt like they deserved more playing time than they were getting?
Yeah, it's never easy. It's never easy, and I completely understand. I completely understand the frustration, and both those two young men are great people and really good players. So. It's tough to manage, but we've just kept moving forward and continue to focus on what we can and getting better.
Deep right, Spencer Holbrook, Letterman Row.
With the two guys transferring out, you lose not only veterans but people who were viewed as leaders coming into the season. How important has Studrawa been in the last couple of weeks, not only as a captain of the team but just in the room and keeping everybody focused?
Yeah, he's one of the major contributing factors to how we're able to stay focused. I mean, he has been an excellent leader, voted captain, and just brings it every day. So very, just appreciative and proud of Taraj and really how he's taken everything from his, my first time, my first year here to now. He's taken everything and really tried to use it to his advantage and to become more of whatever he needs to be for that moment. So he's done a great job, and he's a big part of that culture.
When you look back now 6 weeks ago, do you think that in hindsight, like Tommy and Cody weren't exactly ready to play, but they needed to play, and now finally you're seeing the production kind of turn and you're seeing them play well? Do you feel like they're actually ready now?
Yeah, you know what? Every rep that we have, they get more and more, they get better and better. But two of those young men, I've always had, just a high opinion of as football players and as men. So I think, early on in the year compared to now, there has been progress, and there has been, more comfort in terms of being out there. So yeah, I think those are positives for sure, right? I mean, because moving forward, they're going to be counted on in a major way. So, you do feel good about that.
Fourth row middle, Pat Murphy, 24/7 Sports.
How, going back to when the guys decided to transfer, just keeping that room together, keeping focused, as you mentioned, on the objective at hand. What are conversations like with the guys that remain? You don't want to have guys thinking about that, I assume, and it's just what is that conversation like when you do lose two guys in a quick period?
Yeah, I think I'll tell you, the conversation was on the moment. Say, hey guys, what do we need to do? Obviously right now we need to improve. We need to focus on the things we need to control, and that's been the narrative. And it's never gone negative. We've always been positive, and we've got to take advantage of the time we have. So that's been our message, and you just have to be persistent in that. And you have to know who you are. You have to know what you stand for, and I think those things help. In terms of how do we keep it together, because tough times, they come. The challenging times come, but you have to persist. You've got to stick to what you came in to the situation. You have to stick to it, and I believe that. So that's been our message every day, and that's going to be our message. That's our message here in about an hour, and when we get on that field, that's our mentality. And if you continue to do that, then you improve, and that's ultimately our most important. That's the most important objective we have.
Right next door, Doug Lamarice, Cleveland.com.
Hey, Doug.
Hey, with the Bullets being in the DB room,
yeah,
what did it mean for you? You used to have 3 positions worth of snaps in your room to divvy up, and now you have 2 pretty much. I know that third linebacker works in here and there, but how has that changed anything about how you do your job?
Well, I think you obviously focus in on the jobs that the people out there are going to be doing. So we do have packages. Obviously, we have 3 to 4 linebackers on the field. I think it's based on who you play. So if you play in a team that is more spread oriented, that player is going to be more in space. So that's just the nature of it. So, but I don't think it's a change all that much in terms of how I approach what we're doing. I think it's more a reflection of the defense and really what teams are doing to put us in those situations, if that makes sense.
And then obviously, the Kayvon situation, the way it played out publicly like that was unusual. You don't typically see something like that.
Yeah.
Understanding the frustration of a young person in that situation, did that cause any reevaluation on your part of how did it get to this point? What could I have done better? Is there an issue in our room to have someone kind of reach that point? Did you ever wonder to yourself, man, is there something here that's not right that maybe led to that?
Yeah, no question. Anytime there's something like that happens, you do reflect. And Kayvon was frustrated, and I get that. And I don't judge him off that. I mean, he's a great kid. So yeah, you absolutely look into say, what led up to this, and ultimately, man, at the end of the day, you look at those things, you apply it, what you learn from a situation, and you keep doing the best you can with the decisions you have to make. And that's ultimately what you have to do. And so, You know, to answer your question in regards to that, yeah. And listen, my relationship with him, I mean, I still have a relationship with him, and I got nothing but love for him, man. I mean, he's a great kid, you know, he really is. So that's what I have to say to that, you know.
Second row middle, Dave Biddle, 24/7 Sports.
Al, you only have 6 healthy scholarship linebackers on the roster. That's pretty rare.
Yeah.
How big of a challenge is that for you, and are you concerned about the depth there?
Yeah, you always, you know, the depth is always a concern, you know what I mean? Especially, you know, you've got 6, but you feel really good about those 6. You know, you feel really good about where they are, where they're trending. But yeah, you obviously would like to have, you know, you'd like to bolster yourself as much as you can. But to say that, you know, I'm concerned and worried, so I can't say that. You know, I feel that we have who we have, I feel real strong about. And it's just, you know, a daily deal where we have to, you know, continue to grind away and improve, and that's what our mentality's been. So I feel very excited about those guys and very excited about the direction they're headed.
Reed Carrick is just a true freshman, but we're seeing more true freshmen play for the Buckeyes than I think we've ever seen.
Yeah.
How close is he to playing this year, or maybe is he a year away from playing?
Yeah, you know, Reed is progressing. It's hard to say. You know, it's really hard to say right now for Reed, being a freshman. And, you know, I guess if things, you know, circumstances warranted, then yeah, you know, he would have to be thrust. But right now, you know, I'm very pleased with his progress, very pleased with, you know, every day how he's going about his business. So, you know, I guess, you know, to answer your question, I think he's trending in the right direction, you know, and very pleased with him. Yeah. Hey, Bill.
Carrick Holmes spoke last week and talked about this has been the hardest year professionally for him. I would imagine with what you've had to deal with, I mean, you're a lot younger, but has this been the most challenging year for you?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I've you know, we've all had tough experiences and challenging moments. Yeah, there's been moments that have been very challenging, right? Things that are unusual, right? That don't usually occur. But in the same breath, we're still in it, you know, and you know, our focus is on kind of how things will end, so to speak, where things are trending. So I guess maybe I can answer that question better later in the year. But I will tell you early on, yeah, there's some challenging moments for sure. It's not just Coach Combs, it's everybody. You know, we all have a great expectation. So early on, you know, that bump was what it was. But what you're seeing from him and what you're seeing from the remaining of the staff, guys are digging in and responding.
Matt Barnes is now calling the plays. Could you describe the dynamic at work and what Matt has brought to the defense in that role?
Yeah, Matt's done a phenomenal job, and really the dynamic hasn't changed much. You know, we all, you know, it's a collaborative effort. So I think, you know, the dynamic is what it is, and I think everybody's is you know, supportive, obviously, and Matt's done a hell of a job, done a great job. Yeah.
Right next door, Tim May, Letterman Row.
Hey, Tim.
How you doing, Al?
Good.
I was going to ask you last week when Kerry was in there. I asked him about Steel Chambers.
Yeah.
What sets us up? He goes, he sees, he goes. You know,
Yeah.
and I'm just wondering, as you evaluate him to this point, what are the things he really needs to bring to the table? Maybe what are the things he's brought to the table? What are the things he really needs to bring to the table the last half of the season to really make that jump?
Yeah, I mean, number one, he's just approached it the right way. He comes into work every day with the right mentality. You know, I think he's working really hard off the field as well. You know, there's a lot of stuff thrown at, really, we're talking, you know, a handful of months where he's had to learn a playbook, learn a new system, and it's been some time since he's been a linebacker. So I think, you know, his approach is the right, you know, he's got the right approach. Obviously, I think he has really good instinct. I think just time, you know, I think reps, I think those types of things will help him maybe see things a little quicker. But not to say he's not. You know, I think he's done a phenomenal job. He's you know, he's really progressed so fast. So I think what he brings to the table is that approach of, you know, working your tail off and really working at, you know, the off the field stuff, which is a big part of the position, as you know.
Well, quickie, when you look up, you guys are going through that overhaul after week 2, and you look up and the head coach is sitting in the room with you,
Yeah.
usually not in there, et cetera, and it's moved on since then. What is the biggest change you think you guys have made? Obviously, I've gone to 2 high safeties a lot now and things like that, but what's the biggest change you think you've made that's made the big change in this defense?
Yeah, I mean that's a hard question, Tim. I mean, I think when you're met with that type of challenge, you just kind of go back. You put your cleats in the ground, so to speak. You kind of slow things down and you kind of do the little things. You try to go about doing the little things better. And I think that was really, not much has changed. I mean, our defense isn't dramatically, different than what it was. I mean, I think everybody, I can speak for myself, is, okay, what do we need to, let's slow down here. Let's go back to the basics. Let's go back to square one. Let's do the little things. And I think time as well. I think that's a big part of it too. A lot of those guys are out there more and more, and naturally, things slow down a little bit. So, that answers your question.
Time for a couple more. Over here, far right, Tony Girdman, Buckeye School.
Hey, Tony.
Regarding Steele,
Yeah.
when did you know he'd be okay?
Well, I mean, I guess early on we had a scrimmage. I can recall the scrimmage this summer, man, and he was his first reps out there, and man, he shot through the gap, made a big play, and you just said to yourself, man, he was able to identify that quick and pulled the trigger. So, athletically he flashes, he moves well, but I just, you feel good about where he's going based on how he is, how he conducts himself, and naturally, how he's performing. So I would say to you early on, we kind of had an idea he'd be a good player.
And then in the meeting rooms, how long did it take him to start talking linebacker and speaking the language?
Pretty early on. He's a very, very bright kid. And I think naturally being on offense, you have an appreciation, a little bit of defense, him being a running back. So I think that helped. But, I just think early on he started talking, early on in the process and hasn't stopped yet. And, I think it speaks to the culture of the guys in the room. I mean, you got, guys like Taraja, we had mentioned, Cody Simon, Tommy Eichenberg. Those guys have all kind of corralled him and really helped along the process as well. So I think they're a big part of it too.
Right front, last question, Clay Hall, WSYS.
Hey, Clay.
Now, what do you make of the Big Ten race the rest of the way? You've got some monster games coming up, and everybody's in the hunt.
Yeah.
The high caliber of football the league is playing now.
It is, and our focus is this week. That's literally, and I'm speaking for myself and I'm speaking for my guys. It is right now. This week. It's nothing, no game more important. So, maximizing Tuesday is our focus. I think if you do that, everything else takes care of itself. But we got to be at our best every time we're on the field. So that's our objective. That's our focus.
They touched on it, but what stabilized the defensive coaching staff? It was going back to square one.
Yeah, I think that was part of it. But I just think the character of the people in the room. I think everybody everybody has a collaborative mentality. So, wherever things are, man, we want to keep pushing the needle forward. There's no ego. There's none of that. We're trying to do everything we can do to help, obviously. And I think it speaks to the kids. I think it speaks to the players. I mean, the maturity they've shown and the toughness they've shown is a big part of it too. So I think there's a lot there. I don't think it's just one thing, but I think a lot of factors, contribute.
You have Ryan Day's respect. The thing has been fixed. He said he's backed off a little bit.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for Ryan, but yeah, I mean, it's we absolutely, hope we have Ryan's respect as we know we do, so, I'd agree with that.
Coach, thank you very much.
Great job. I missed 4 days, so I missed that Tulsa game. But those guys did a fantastic job. Kennedy did a great job. Kevin obviously knows line play, so they didn't skip a beat.
And, it was kind of assumed Harry would be the starter at the beginning of the year, and then obviously he misses some time. how many weeks maybe went by that you started feeling comfortable with Luke that you can't really pull him from that spot at that point?
Well, I felt comfortable from the get-go because the truth of the matter is those two have competed, and it was a competition right up till about 10 days before the Minnesota game when we made the decision that it was going to be Harry. But I was comfortable with both of them, and the competition that went through, camp and all those things was fantastic. So I had complete confidence in both of them. Harry had a little bit more experience, so I, maybe a tad more comfortable there. But the things Luke was doing, and he's such a student of the game that it really didn't bother me too much.
Right behind him, Bill Landis, The Athletic.
Stud, there are some grades that I know aren't your grades that say Matt Jones is playing like one of the better linemen in the country, let alone in your room. How close is that to how you would assess his play thus far?
He's playing well. He's made such great leaps and bounds, and it's coming to maturity level. He's finally now understanding what it takes, the extra time it takes to put in. The fact that, it's not just about knowing your assignment, it's about knowing how to do it. And so he has spent so much more time now and invested so much more time. That's why I'm rotating those guys now. He deserves to play. And, Thayer's been a little banged up. Paris has been a little banged up. So the opportunity to put a guy in there and rotate and help those guys and not skip a beat has been fantastic. So Matt's really, really playing well.
If it comes a time where you, for whatever reason, you can't rotate, you just got to settle on the 5 and play the best 5. Is Matt making any kind of move to be in that best 5?
Absolutely.
Or would you consider reshuffling things?
Absolutely. It would be really hard. And the thing about it now is Matt's also the backup center right now. So he's really kind of doing some double duty as we practice and prepare each week. But if it came to that, absolutely, it'd be a very hard decision because he's in the mix now.
Second row right, Austin Ward, Letterman Row.
Stud, I think we've all heard offensive line coach say, we'd love to rotate. We hope we can rotate for years and years, and then it never actually happens. Did you really think that this year could be different than that?
No, I don't think so. I thought that it would be settled on a 5. You think about that stuff all summer long in preparation. And I've never been a guy that has had the opportunity to rotate guys like that. You want to get those 5 in there. You want to get them comfortable with each other, and you want to play them. But the fact that there's some younger guys that have come along so well, and Matt Jones's growth and improvement has made me do it because the kid deserves to play. And again, like I said, when other guys are banged up and maybe can't go to 80 or 90 plays, it gives you an opportunity to get them out and get them rested and keep them healthy for the long haul. Because now, it's halfway right now. We're heading into the storm now. And so they got to be as healthy as they can and the ability to rotate them. Then if something does happen, like you saw, we lost Dewan that last play. Thayer goes back to tackle, Matt jumps in, Nick goes, and boom, we don't skip a beat. So those things are nice problems to have.
I was going to ask if Nick did a double take when you're telling, after all this work to get to the left side, you guys got to go back to the right now.
It's funny, Nick's the one that said it. Because we're in the locker room when Dewan was feeling a little bit ill at the halftime of that game. And I'm like, okay, here we go. Nick goes, Coach, I'll just go to the right, put Thayer in there. So he actually is the one that made the decision. I said, that's a great idea, Nick. Why don't you do that?
Third row middle, Nathan Barrett, Cleveland.com.
I wanted to ask about Dewan. During the recruiting process, when were you really comfortable that he had the commitment to football that you needed him to have?
About a year after he was here. Obviously we took a chance there. And he loved basketball so much. But when you see a kid that was that big then at 400 pounds, running up and down the floor, dunking a basketball, leading the fast break, and doing the things that he did athletically, your mind just says that's a big-time tackle. And that was the issue, getting him to buy in that, you're not a basketball player anymore. Now you're a football player. Your mentality has to change. What you do has to change. And it took some time because he loved basketball so much. But it took some time to convince him. But once he was convinced, and really, to be honest with you, that came in the spring for me, that I was totally, okay, he's convinced. I'm convinced now that he loves football, that he wants to improve and he wants to do things. He spent so much extra time this summer doing it. And then when camp started, he was by far the best guy through camp.
Did you have to approach coaching him in a different way? Because Ryan was just in here talking about how it's almost like that reward system that you get in basketball, the constant play is different than being an offensive lineman. Did you have to try to get to him in a different way?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. There's a lot of different ways. I think that you reach everybody, but he's different because of basketball. you know, the motivation of those kids, I think, is different than it is in football. And I think I've had to learn how to do that, and he's had to learn how to adjust to me. So it was a kind of a, you know, two-way street there. But once we figured it out, he took off, and now, I mean, he's playing really good football.
Right in front of him. Dave Biddle, 24/7 Sports.
Hey, Greg, obviously continuity is so important on the offensive line. How do you balance that with, you basically have 6 starters right now, we're talking about with Matt Jones. How do you balance that with, you know, not just having 5 guys out there, but getting, you know, basically having 6 starters right now?
Well, like I said, I think it's good because I think I can keep those 2 guys that are a little banged up more healthy. And, you know, but it's hard. It's difficult for Matt, too. It shows you how far he comes because there's reps in practice that he has to take at center because he's the next guy in there as well. So not only is he playing both guard spots, he's playing the center spot as well. So, again, that gives us flexibility that if something happens in a game, I've got someone to go somewhere at all those spots that again, I don't think we lose a beat. I think we're just as good. And so the fact that those guys are versatile and can do so many things helps me out a big time.
We spoke with Luke Whitler a few weeks ago, and he was talking about his hobbies. He says his hobbies are basically watching film and working out. And I don't think he was saying it to sound good to the media. It sounds like he's being serious. Is that pretty rare to have a guy like that?
At that age, yes, absolutely. Billy Price was like that as a junior and a senior. But Luke's been like that as a freshman. I mean, we got done with that game down in Miami, and we go home the next day, and I'm sitting at home, and he sends me videos of him out in the indoor snapping the ball and executing certain blocks. I got a 30-minute video. I'm like, spring ball's not coming up yet, Luke, you're okay. But that's the kind of kid he is. He's in the indoor the next day. They flew back, and he's snapping the balls. Is this good? Is that good? That's the kind of dedication. That's why when the injuries, when Harry was sidelined, it was, go, Luke, you're gonna, it was no issue.
Fourth row middle. Pat Murphy, 24/7 Sports.
Hey, Greg. When you were out, Ryan mentioned that you were able to still watch some film, still do some things. What were you able to do, and how helpful was that? I know you mentioned other guys were able to step in and kind of do things for you, but the technology allowing you to do stuff, how helpful was that?
Unbelievable. That you know, we were prepared for it because of COVID. We had all the Zoom stuff already set up, so it was kind of neat. I was Zooming from the recovery room in surgery. I had them on there Zooming, so it was really good. You know, it's like anything else. When you have your offensive line coach, they get a certain comfort from seeing it and hearing it from me. I mean, they get it from the other guys, no big deal. But to be able to get on Zoom and I can look them in the eye and watch the practice film, hey, don't do this, do that, you know, make those corrections. I think it gave them a certain comfort zone that things were still good. There's coach's face, there's coach yelling at me, whatever it was, they could still see it. And so the change wasn't really big for them until I got back.
How difficult was it watching a game from at the field?
You have no idea. No idea. I was bleeding out of my back. I'm throwing the phone. I was calling cell phones. I know they didn't even have them. I'm trying to get a hold of somebody on the side. I mean, it was torture. I mean, to tell you, I was taking some more pills so I could calm down. Absolutely.
Right next door, Doug Lesmerises, Cleveland.com.
What's the sick day policy here? You don't get a whole sick day for surgery? You're watching Zooms in the recovery room?
No, they called me, coach, you come back tomorrow? No, I'm still bleeding. Hold on, guys. Let me figure that out. No, I tell them. They're like, you tell us. I'm like, you're right. I'll be back in a minute.
You mentioned that Matt is the backup center right now.
Yes.
We've seen Harry in warm-ups and that kind of thing. Like, where is Harry? What's his progress, and what would have to happen for him to get back in the mix, even with the second team?
We got to get him practicing consistently is the first thing. To get him back totally healthy and get him have a consistent week of practice and where he goes full go and doesn't have any reoccurrences. That's what's happened. And so when he can get consistent and get a whole good week of practice in there, then I'm going to start to weed him back into that situation. And then I have, you know, again, then there's another 2 guards and there's another center. And again, now we're deeper. So as soon as we can get him practicing for a whole week and keep him healthy, then he's going to get right back in the rotation.
Is he frustrated?
He is, obviously. You know, and whenever you're not out there and you're not around with the guys and you can't compete at a level that you want to compete at, it's very frustrating for him.
Front row middle, Bill Rubinowitz, Columbus Dispatch.
Thanks, Doug. I know you guys don't like talking in detail about player injuries. I'm hoping you can share a little more about what you went through. What was your back issue? How long has it been bothering you?
It happened, I think, at the Minnesota game. and I got kind of banged on the sideline and didn't think anything of it, and flew home, and the next morning I wake up and there's a shooting pain down and my left leg won't work. So it wasn't anything like, hey, just put this off. I couldn't walk. So I got, doc looked at me and we did some medicine, some treatments, and after about a week it still wouldn't go away. So there was no choice except, to coach that Tulsa week and then have surgery that Thursday, and I missed that game and then came back on Monday. But there was no choice. It had to get done or I wouldn't be able to walk. Disc. It was a disc L4 and L5 that, in the nerve that controls your left leg.
How do you feel now?
Better. Getting better. Not 100% yet. It's a tough deal. Don't ever have it. If anybody wants to have it, don't ever do it. But if it had to be done, Dr. Khan was fantastic, and each day gets a little bit better.
Got time for just a couple more. Over here to the far right, Tony Gerben, Buckeye Scoop.
Greg, how much did last year's constant switching of the offensive line due to COVID help this year?
Can't imagine. I couldn't put it into words how much those kids already having the pressure, having to step up, having to play on the road at Michigan State and do those things, how much that helped, Dewan and Matt and all those Fryer, all those young kids that had to go in and play in that game. That kind of knocked the ice off, knocked the tip off, and now it was nothing to them anymore. So it was big time.
And then we hear all kinds of horror stories about helicopter parents for coaches. What's it like coaching the offensive coordinator's son?
I told Brian in the meeting, I said, hey, listen, this kid's a great player, but his dad's a you-know-what now.
Second row right, Tim May, Letterman row.
Yeah, I was asking Ryan, when you're going against a defense like this, I imagine last year the second half was sort of a horror film a little bit for you guys occasionally. But what is the key for the offensive line? Is it just keep your head on a swivel, don't commit to necessarily what you think, but what you see? I mean, just explain what you're kind of coaching them up on this week more than anything else.
Yeah, it is. When you face a team that shows so many different looks and so many different blitzes, that's exactly what you have to do. But it's also something that we focused on because there was more than one game last year at halftime that we had a comfortable lead and came out Rutgers. Came out, and then same thing in Indiana. Came out 42-7 or whatever it was, and they fought back and played hard. So we talked about that more than anything else. At halftime, the score is 0-0. Let's go out with the same kind of attitude, the same kind of preparation that you started the game with. And again, I think 2 times now we've done that. We've come out and finished games. So I think mentally it's more important because when you get a lead, sometimes those guys tend to get complacent. And you know how it is. You got 4 guys or 5 guys. If 4 do their job, something's wrong. So you have to be focused, and especially against teams like that, what they do. So we've really talked about that a bunch, and so far we've kept that up. But like you said, it's attention to detail. You got to be on a swivel. You got to know what's going on. You got to have a good idea because they're going to throw something at you that you haven't seen. So calm down. We'll adjust. We'll fix it. We'll move forward. So we've.
I can tell you examples with the last several games where it looks like your guys are very aware of what's happening in front of them for the most part. They're passing off stunts and stuff, and guys are right there. Yeah. Do you get that sense too? Is this a confident unit in that regard?
Right now, it is. It is. You're right because Maryland. I was nervous in that game because they led the Big Ten in sacks, and that was a good pass rushing team. Their blitz package was excellent, and those guys picked it up. And with each passing game, and they pass a test like that, they get a little more confident. But I think their attention to detail and preparation is something that's led to that. They study the film, they prepare. If somebody does something new, go back to your rules, go back to your training. What do we do? And they've done that so far. You're right.
Right next door, Joey Kaufman, Columbus Dispatch.
Greg, when you guys played Indiana last year, they blitzed quite a bit, brought a lot of pressure. Are you mindful of the fact that they could try to do the same thing?
Absolutely. We've been focusing on that, even starting last week and the off week of all the pressures because they do it out of a lot of different fronts. They bring everybody. They'll bring linebackers. They'll bring corners. They'll bring safeties. They do it all. So we've been mindful of that from the time the game was played and started working on that last week.
How do you, looking and grading your pass protection from your guys the first half of the year, they haven't given up very many sacks. What have you thought of the job? Is that just probably playing a lot of tackles, former tackles on the line, or what do you attribute that to?
No, I think number one, we put an emphasis on it, which with I put a hard emphasis on it even through spring and camp in the off season, simply because we have a freshman quarterback, and I wanted to make sure that there was not issues where he felt uncomfortable back there. And if we give up pressures, even the firmness of the pocket, that's been so much better to me than it was last year. Last year it shrunk, and when it shrinks around the quarterback, if it's Justin, he had no problem. But if you get a freshman, young guys back there, then there's issues. So I wanted to work on the firmness of the pocket and keeping that clean. So it's been a big emphasis for us all the way through. And I think they've taken it really, really seriously, trying to help that kid grow. And as long as we can keep him clean, you can see what he can do. We just have to keep him clean. Obviously, that they're going to try to make sure that doesn't happen Saturday, and we have to be sharp on top of our game.
And final questions, third row left hand, Hope 11 Warriors.
Yeah, Greg, Toby's been getting most of the second team reps at that center spot. What has he done as a freshman walk-on to earn his way into that role?
It's amazing. He's a coach's kid. That's the first thing I can say. He's been around the game. He's grown up in the game. We've had injuries with the rest of the backup centers, and Toby's played the position. So we put him in there, and he's continued to grow and grow and grow, and is doing a great job. He's earned where he is, and he's playing pretty well. A couple of the games, he's gone in there and made some really, really good blocks for a freshman walk-on to go into that situation. So I think he'll continue to grow and get better and work hard. So I'm pretty proud of what he's done.
Matt being the next man up there, have you thought about getting him in there for some snaps at center just in case you do need him there later in the year?
Absolutely. That's kind of, to me, that's kind of a touchy situation, but I have. You sit there on the sideline and you look at the score and you think Matt Jones goes in there and somebody falls on his knee and rolls him up. Well, it's 50 to whatever. Why is Matt in the game? So, that always, as soon as I want to do it, somebody grabs me in the back of my head, and I stopped doing that. So I try to get him that work in a little bit of a safer environment at practice during the week when we're staying up and doing those things so that he still stays sharp at that position. But in those kind of situations, I really wouldn't want something bad to happen.
Coach, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.